So, I have new glasses, a new comforter, and a new medication, and we are back taking it one day at a time. Let's talk about some things that I've read recently. The first book I want to talk about, if I even can talk about it, we'll get into that, is Madame Bovary, which I mentioned a bit in my last video on what I'm reading right now. The issue with Madame Bovary is that I actually don't know if I read the book, because turns out the audiobook I listened to for free on Spotify was an abridged version. And I did not know that. In fact, I was so confused by the fact that this audiobook was only 3 hours. I went and Googled other Madame Bovary audiobooks, saw that they were up to 8 hours, and also realized, yeah, there was a lot of stuff in the movie adaptation that wasn't in this. Now, I know many things are often changed in adaptation, but I was quite perturbed to find out that this was the abridged version after Googling Madame Bovary plus the actress's name who narrated it and finding a CD version on eBay that had abridged in the product description. So, I enjoyed it, but I don't feel like I actually read it. And not to turn this into a whole argument about the pros and cons of abridged books, because frankly, I've never even thought about them. But what frustrates me is that I feel like as a reader, as a listener, I should be notified in the description, in the title, something, if what I am reading is not what the author originally put out. And on one hand, I think of Victor Hugo, and I think about the Hunchback of Notre Dame and how it was adapted into a play, La Bohème, that had a very different ending and characters that didn't die, that did die in the book. But that to me is different because one, it's an adaptation into a completely different medium, and also Victor Hugo himself wrote that play. So I am totally fine with an author revisiting their work and updating it, changing it, adding new context in the text. I'm not talking about tweets, JK Rowling. I'm fine with that. But to have this abridged version, I guess created by an estate or some other author years and years and years after the death of the original author, Gustave Flaubert, that kind of puts my mind in a bit of a pretzel, because who are we to decide that this book is better or, more accessible or whatever logic they're using when we are not the person who originally wrote it? So to get into the context of the book itself, Madame Bovary is a novel about a woman who becomes obsessed with this idea of luxury and passion and fantasy, ideas she picked up reading these kind of fantasy, intense love novels when she was younger, and marries an older doctor and is so unsatisfied with her life that she has affairs, she racks up tons of debt, she has multiple lovers and plans on running away with her child, all of these things. She's never satisfied by her actual day-to-day life. And in the end, spoiler alert, she kills herself when all of her debts catch up to her. And what I found interesting about the story itself is that you could look at it through the lens of this early 2000s girl boss white feminism and think, well, of course she's upset. Of course she wants more. This is a woman who's expected to just keep house and be arm candy for her husband. This is a woman who's expected to bear children and, show up in the town square for events. Why shouldn't she want love? Why shouldn't she want adventure and travel? But on the flip side, you have the fact that she completely neglects her child because motherhood isn't what she thought it would be. She has a kind, steadfast, loyal husband that she completely takes advantage of in a variety of ways. And even in her day-to-day life, it's one of those things where you're reading these scenes that are, again, very well written, where she's wistfully looking out at the window and just imagining her own suffering and, being very melodramatic and self-absorbed about, oh, I'm such a good woman for not cheating on my husband until she cheats multiple times. I want to read the full story of Madame Bovary to get all the context around the first Madame Bovary, the doctor's mother, the second Madame Bovary, the doctor's first wife. I want to learn more about their child. I want to learn more about the world they live in. But I'm a little annoyed because I feel like I not wasted time, but spent, X amount of hours going through a story only to find out that it wasn't really the story I was looking for. And maybe that's a controversial opinion, are abridged books the same story, the same book as the full-length version? We'll see. But that was something that frustrated me. So I'll just be mindful, if you are listening to free audiobooks on Spotify, like I tried to do, even though I'm not an audiobooks girl, make sure you get all the details ahead of time. Maybe do some cross-referencing to figure that out. Would I recommend Madame Bovary? Of what I read, yes. But I don't really feel like I can recommend anything other than this specific abridged version. Because then I also found out that sometimes abridged versions differ. There can be multiple abridged versions of the same book. And frankly, just off the cuff of my head, cuff of my head, off the cuff, don't. Anyway, frankly, it gets on my nerves. Moving on to the next book, we have Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. Now, this review, we can either thank or blame, depending on your opinion. Alex, from what page are you on? Since I read The Buried Giant by this author years ago, saw that book and that author being talked about on Alex's page, commented that like, yeah, I'm glad you like it, it didn't really work for me, and he encouraged me to try him again. And I did. And I didn't have a great time. So, not blaming Alex, I'm just saying I tried, sir. So this book is kind of a sci-fi dystopian book that bounces back and forth between time, and you are getting the childhood, the teenage years, the upbringing, the adult years about 3 specific friends, 2 girls and 1 guy. And I can't give you too much information about the plot because information is deliberately woven in slowly throughout the book about who these people are, why their upbringing was so different, what their place in the world is, and then all the secrets around their world, all the secrets and misinformation and coded language about who they are and what they're here to do. One thing I disliked about this book was that every time there was a reveal, as opposed to it being like, oh my gosh, wow, it was like, okay, yeah, I knew that. Like, I felt like I caught up earlier than the plot was allowing, and so I was constantly in this ebb and flow of, oh, cool, this is new information, this is interesting, okay, I got it, and now I have to wait X amount of pages to have it be confirmed. Oh great, I was right. All right, back up again, oh, now I got it, and so on and so forth. I will say that I do think Ishiguro is a really talented writer. I mean, at the time I read The Buried Giant, I didn't know he had won a Nobel Prize, and there are definitely moments in this book where I'm just like, the way he pieces words together, the characterization of the main characters that you meet, the way he's able to talk about really subtle, nuanced feelings and emotions, the way he's able to write up conversations between girls. This may sound odd as hell for me to say about a male writer, but the way he talked about the subtlety, the power dynamics, the feeling of, being so angry at a friend, but not wanting to get back at them, just wanting to be able to forgive them. Like, I felt so seen in the way that our main character, who is a woman, reflected on her childhood and her teenage years, and reflected on her ever-evolving friendship with the girls in her school, the girls in her workplace. And I was so surprised that a man was able to write these things. I really was just like, who told him? Who gave him the secrets? And there were even scenes he wrote in which I was like, I have never put words to that. I absolutely do that thing, or I have done that thing. I've been in a situation in which me and another person are trying to offer the other forgiveness without ever actually apologizing in words, without ever actually touching on what made us so mad at each other in the first place. Like, I was so impressed at the way that he was able to, tease out these instances that in real life would simply be like a holding of the breath when you realize someone's about to say something they promised they wouldn't, or the eye contact between a person and someone else in the group, and you already know exactly that there's something about to go down. So there absolutely were elements of this book that I enjoyed. I do think the writing was excellent. It just wasn't exactly the story for me. In addition, this story is very, very familiar to another story, a movie that was released in the same year that I don't want to tell you the name of because it will reveal all of the secrets of the book. And I did as much research as I could stand after my Madame Bovary debacle. I could not find any overlap between the two. And it just seemed odd to me. I know it takes years to write books and to make movies, but to have 2 movies in which the central plot, which is quite a specific one, this isn't just like 2 movies with aliens or 2 movies with enemies to lovers, a very, very similar plot released in the same year and seemingly have no connection. I think that after reading The Buried Giant and Never Let Me Go, I can confidently say I think this man is a talented writer. I think he is definitely a wordsmith. I love the way that he puts words together. And if I had to read maybe a short story of his, or if I could just read, individual scenes from some of these books, I would be like, wow, I love this. But the full-length books aren't really doing it for me. And again, this is one of the reasons why I don't rate books, because what would I do with this? What would I do with a book that I think is well written in many aspects, but also almost moved too slowly for me, moved too slowly for someone who figured out the secrets ahead of time, and therefore the reveals weren't reveals at all. They were just, okay, here's the benchmark until we start to get new information. So maybe if you read this book and you don't figure those things out ahead of time, and each of those kind of like aha moments actually feel like this big surprise, maybe it would propel the pace better. But pacing in this book and just the general structure of the story, normally I like non-linear stories, but to have so much of the most interesting information be in the childhood, be in the teenage years, but the book like starts, it is interspersed with and ends with the people in like their 40s and like reflecting back on their time, wasn't really for me. So the next book I want to talk about is Sing, Unburied, Sing by Jesmyn Ward. Now, a little fun fact about this, I have been meaning to read this book for years. I actually had a picture of this cover on a vision board I had years ago as like a sign for me to read more books, and I finally did. So I love this book. I would highly recommend it, and this is a book that has absolutely got me interested into more works by Jesmyn Ward, the author. So Sing, Unburied, Sing is essentially a road trip novel and a ghost novel. The main character is Joseph, a 13-year-old biracial boy living in Mississippi. He has a drug-addicted, absentee mother. His father's in jail. He is raised primarily by his grandfather and his grandmother until his grandmother becomes bedridden because she is dying of cancer. And the bulk of the story, it takes place with Jojo, which is his nickname, and his little sister, Kayla, on a road trip with their mother and their mother's friend to go to Parchman Prison, the place where his grandfather was once kept prisoner, and retrieve his father from jail. Now, the ghost story element is really, really interesting to me because this book has multiple POVs. You read chapters from the perspective of Jojo, the perspective of his mother, Leonie, and from the perspective of Richie, who is the main ghost you interact with, but not the only ghost. And really, what I really love about this book is, one, each of the characters felt so specific and real to me. I felt like these were people who, whether or not I had my favorites, I did. They were people who I could imagine knowing if I didn't already know, if that makes sense. I loved the way that the relationship between Jojo and his little sister Kayla is depicted and showed. Like, this is a perfect example of show not tell, since you know Joseph, who's only 13, truly loves his toddler sister, but there's very few times, I don't know if there's a single time in which you hear him, the character, say I love you to this little girl. It's in the way that they sleep together with their arms entwined. It's the way that he is so concerned with her when she gets sick. He doesn't mind that he's covered in vomit. He's just working on soothing her and holding her, and her love for him as well. It's the way that she puts her body in between her 13-year-old brother and a cop with a gun to protect him. It's the ways in which she tries to comfort him, and the type of sensitivity that he has, she has as well when it comes to understanding things about people without them saying it, seeing certain spirits and such. And it's so interesting to me to hear a 13-year-old give his perspective on the realization that he's able to know things that other people don't know, and he's able to see and hear things that other people can't see. And then this toddler who is realizing early on that she knows things that the grown-ups around her don't know. It's such a beautiful relationship. And even the chapters that are written from the perspective of Leonie, their mother, who I have issue with. I don't think it'd be fair just be like, oh, she's a bad person, end of story. But I was gritting my teeth every time I had to read a chapter from her perspective. Even with that in mind, the way Jesmyn Ward wrote about Leonie still inspired empathy. You know, like, it still kind of felt that even though Leonie was often a villain, I'd argue, to Kayla and Jojo, when you kind of look at it from her perspective, when you see the circumstances she's been through, when you see her passionate love for Michael, her boyfriend that she's been with for years, even though his family is racist, and we can get into that later, like, you empathize. And I appreciate what Ward does by making arguably the most unlikable character in this story empathetic, and arguably the most lovable character in the story, Pop, Jojo's grandpa, seeing the dark sides of him, seeing his sins and how they've affected other people, and how they've affected himself. So it is a really excellent book. Just so you know, when I say it's a ghost story, it's not a horror novel at all. It's not trying to scare you. There are a couple scenes that I would say are kind of like unnerving and creepy, simply because you're imagining what it must feel like to see a young boy, the ghost of a young boy, curled up on the floor of your car, staring at you and asking you questions. But I thought it was so beautiful, and it's definitely one of those books, again, I would love to like discuss with my class. Like, there's beautiful motifs about water. One of the characters is named River. One of the other characters is called the Saltwater Woman. You have a big revelation, fishing with your dad. I think there's really awesome questions to be asked about family and obligation, family and race. What does it mean to love someone and to have someone love you when you're two different races and there are members of your family that are in pretty much eternal conflict? What does it mean to have children who have to bear so much more responsibility than is fair for their age? Like, there's so much to unpack in this book, and I would absolutely read it again. I would absolutely recommend it, and I would love it if this was a movie or a miniseries. Definitely not like, this is not something that can extend, or I don't think something it should that be extended across multiple seasons. But there's so much imagery in here. Jesmyn Ward is an incredibly poetic writer that I can't even imagine what it would look like on screen. Like, I'm trying to like find like a moment or not, but I can't. Like, so much of this book is just so beautifully written, even when what she's writing about is terrible, when it's absolutely terrible. So that was Sing, Unburied, Sing by Jesmyn Ward. And the last book I want to talk about is They Both Die at the End, which I did do an entire video about, and I'll leave that in the description. But the reason I wanted to bring it up again is because it is a recent read, but also I've been doing a bit of more reflecting on the story since I made that video, and I have a few more brief thoughts. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the role of social media and apps in this world. I mean, you learn that there's an app called Notre, which allows individuals to have sex with someone in the last day of their life. There's, of course, the Last Friend app, where the two main characters, Mateo and Rufus, meet, an app for people to find someone to spend their time with if they have no one else. There's, a website where people can post like pictures and videos and updates all throughout their last day. And you also see Rufus, one of our main characters, use Instagram in that way. His entire time of having Instagram, he only did photos in black and white, and during his last day, he only does photos in color. And he shows photos of himself and Mateo throughout all their adventures, all the way up until the last moment. So you get that information, and you do get one short chapter, one POV from the creator of the Last Friend app. You get some kind of backstory into why she made it. But the reason I've been thinking about it is probably because I've been kind of renegotiating my relationship with social media, which is something that happens on a regular basis. And it made me wonder, if I knew that there were options for connection for people who know they're dying in the next 24 hours, would that change the way I look at connection in our regular lives? Let me explain. Like, say, like Instagram stories. I am not someone, do you, if that is you, who like clicks through every single person's Instagram story every day. I simply don't have the time, and I also don't care. But if I lived in a world in which I knew that people would often post when they were notified about their last day, whether it was nosiness, whether it was genuine concern, whether it was just this type A desire to have all the information, I would be scrolling through every single thing to make sure that I don't come to school on Wednesday and miss the fact that, the quarterback of the football team died over the weekend. Like, I know it sounds grim, but I just feel like that is the way that I would process it. In addition, when it comes to the apps, the creator of the Last Friend app was in the process of making a new program that allowed individuals to pre-write or pre-record their final social media message. She makes this comment like, oh, who wants their last tweet ever to be about pizza, and they never got a chance to make another one because they got their death cast call, death cast being the name of the organization that calls you, and then 10 minutes later they died getting out of the shower. And I just found it so interesting that would be something that we would care about. But we wouldn't we? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't use like Twitter or Instagram like that, so I don't know what it would feel like in the afterlife if I'm aware to be like, wow, the last message I told the world was that I think Shawn Mendes should blow my back out. You know, like, I just, like, I can imagine, you know, a person having consciousness in some other realm being like, damn, that's what I went out on? Fine. You know, me twerking in an Elmo costume on Halloween? Okay. But clearly, the way we are perceived by other people and the way that we're remembered by other people matters to us in just like a regular human sense. So what would it mean to live in a world in which that was common? Like, you're sitting there at 12 years old after you sign up for your first Twitter account or something, and you're like, okay, now I have to figure out what would I want my last automated tweet to be if I died. Again, I know that the story They Both Die at the End is focused on this individual relationship between Mateo and Rufus, yet I still maintain that whether it's about mortality, fate, social media, world building, that there were opportunities in that book to explore more, to build more, to touch on some of these really interesting topics without losing the personal connection between those two characters. And that was just something I was thinking about days/weeks after I edited that video. So those are a few books that I've read recently. I've also been doing a number of rereads, so I'll probably do a separate video on that because I want to be able to compare and contrast my experiences the first time with the book, which means it's going to be a little longer. So hopefully it will not be another 3 weeks before I see you again. I am staring down the barrel of graduation. We got 6 weeks left, so after that, I'm all yours. But until then, pray for me, and I'll see you next time.